Picture this. The clock is counting down. Your absolute favorite athlete is closing in on that victorious, game-winning play. The entire crowd is just holding its breath. The stadium goes completely, agonizingly silent. And then, at the absolute most crucial moment imaginable, she misses the shot. We've all seen it, right? We've all felt that collective groan. That competitor just experienced the brutal phenomenon known as choking. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the exact science behind why this happens, and honestly, more importantly, how we can stop it. I want you to be completely honest with yourself for a second. Have you ever choked? Have you ever just completely failed right when it mattered most? Because look, while we usually associate this dramatic failure with elite sports, performing under intense physical pressure, the truth is this deeply frustrating experience haunts pretty much everyone. It happens to brilliant kids in spelling bees, it happens to world-famous musicians stepping onto a stage they've played literally 100 times before, and it absolutely happens to everyday folks like you and me stepping up to give a high-stakes presentation or walking into a make-or-break job interview. Section 1. The anatomy of a choke. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to play psychological detective today and launch a full investigation to uncover exactly what happens in the wiring of our brains when we crack under the spotlight. Because, well, to defeat this enemy, we first have to understand how it operates. So the official definition of choking is failing at a crucial moment despite months or even years of practice. Now, most of us intuitively blame this on our nerves, right? We walk away thinking, oh man, I was just too nervous, my palms were sweating, my heart was racing out of my chest. But science tells us a totally different story. Think about it. Why would a racing heart suddenly undermine expert muscle memory that someone has drilled thousands of times? Well, researchers have found that choking doesn't primarily boil down to just having physical jitters. It actually fundamentally boils down to a massive failure of focus. And there are two major scientific theories that explain exactly how this focus breaks down.
Section 2. Theory 1. Distracted minds. So our first prime suspect in this investigation is distraction. These distraction theories suggest that our performance tanks because our mind suddenly becomes utterly preoccupied. Instead of focusing entirely on the task at hand, your brain is just flooded with worries, doubts, and fears about what happens if you fail. It's a battle of relevant thoughts against completely irrelevant thoughts. Now, to really understand why this ruins us, we have to talk about working memory. Think of your working memory as a mental scratch pad. It's what we use to temporarily store immediate active info, like a phone number someone just yelled out to you, or those 3 specific things you need to grab from the grocery store. But here is the crucial thing. The human brain can only process so much information at once on this scratch pad. Tasks that heavily rely on your working memory are incredibly vulnerable to pressure, simply because anxiety takes up all that valuable space on the pad. Let me give you a perfect example. In a really fascinating 2004 university study, researchers actually put this working memory theory to the test. They had students solve different types of math problems. Some were simple, super ingrained, easy problems, and others were highly complex, memory-intensive ones that required holding multiple numbers in their head at the same time. And they tested them in 2 very different environments. One was a totally chill, calm room with absolutely zero stakes, and the other was a high-pressure scenario where every move they made was being scrutinized. The results? Oh, they were incredibly telling. Under stress, everyone still did perfectly fine on the easy problems. I mean, they didn't really need their scratch pad from 2 plus 2. But when it came to those complex, memory-intensive tasks under pressure, student performance just absolutely crashed. Their working memory scratch pads were completely overloaded with anxiety and the fear of judgment. It literally left no mental room to actually do the math. Section 3. Theory 2. The overthinker. And that brings us to our second group of explanations for choking, which are scientifically known as explicit monitoring theories. Now, while that first theory was all about being distracted by outside worries, explicit monitoring is about what happens when pressure causes us to brutally overanalyze the specific, minute mechanics of what we're actually doing in the moment. And this brilliantly illustrates the overthinker theory in action. Researchers took a group of highly competitive, experienced golfers. Now, these aren't your weekend amateurs. These are pros whose putting strokes are deeply, deeply ingrained muscle memory. When these pros were told to simply focus on putting as accurately as possible, just sink the ball, they performed incredibly well. But then, the researchers ran a second trial. They primed the golfers to be acutely, specifically aware of the exact mechanics of their putting stroke. They asked them to pay close attention to exactly where their elbows were or how their wrists bent during the swing. And the result? Their performance plummeted. They became significantly worse at making accurate shots. Why? Well, because putting is a skill they normally do subconsciously.
Once an action becomes automatic through years of practice, consciously overthinking its precise mechanics actively interferes with your ability to do it. It's kind of like asking a centipede to explain exactly how it moves all its legs. It just trips. You literally get in your own way. Section 4. Who is most vulnerable? We know choking is super common, but it's actually not inevitable for everyone. Some people step into that spotlight and just inexplicably thrive, while others instantly crumble under those exact same lights. So you might be wondering, are you the prime target for these performance-killing mental traps? Well, researchers have pinpointed specific personality profiles that are highly susceptible to choking. If you're a naturally self-conscious person, if you have a high baseline of anxiety in your day-to-day life, or, and this is a big one, if you are deeply afraid of being judged negatively by others, you are at a massively higher risk of choking. These specific traits basically act like an accelerant for both distraction and overthinking when the stakes get high, flooding that mental scratch pad with the fear of embarrassment faster than anything else.
Section 5. How to defeat the choke.
But hey, do not despair. Now that we've diagnosed the sheer agony of the problem and identified exactly how our working memory and our own self-consciousness sabotage us, it's time to talk solutions. We're bringing in an evidence-based tactical plan to conquer performance anxiety once and for all. Here is your 3-step blueprint to outsmarting your own brain. 1. Practice under stressful conditions. 2. Use a pre-performance routine. And 3. Maintain an external focus. We're going to break down the hardcore science behind why each of these is so incredibly effective at keeping you totally grounded when the heat is on. Step 1 is to practice under stressful conditions. In this really remarkable study on expert dart players, researchers discovered something absolutely vital about how we train. Players who only practiced in a calm, relaxed environment, throwing darts with zero consequences and nobody watching, they performed terribly when they were suddenly thrust into an anxious tournament setting. However, the players who deliberately accustom themselves to practicing under pressure performed significantly better when that real tournament anxiety hit. They did this by doing things like placing financial wagers on their practice games or having a live, highly judgmental audience watch them train. By forcing themselves to throw while their heart rate was elevated, they essentially inoculated their working memory against the shock of stress. So when the real pressure arrived, their brains had already adapted to operating in that heightened state.
Okay, step 2 is to establish a pre-performance routine. You see professional athletes do this all the time, right? Like Rafael Nadal constantly adjusts his shirt and bounces the ball a very specific number of times before a serve. And it's not just some quirky superstition. It is hard neuroscience. Studies spanning golf, bowling, and even water polo prove that engaging in short, structured rituals leads to much more consistent and accurate execution under pressure. Whether it's taking 3 deep, measured breaths, bouncing a ball exactly twice, or just repeating a specific keyword in your head, these routines serve a massive cognitive purpose. They occupy your working memory just enough to physically block out irrelevant, distracting thoughts about the crowd or the outcome. And they anchor your mind firmly in the present moment.
And finally, step 3. So the crucial point here is understanding the fundamental difference between an internal and an external focus. Remember those elite golfers who overthought their exact mechanics and completely failed? That is an internal focus. It's turning your brain inward to tune into the specific motion of your own arms or the angle of your wrists. Researchers have conclusively shown that an external focus on the ultimate goal is vastly superior. In studies, experienced golfers who hit chip shots while focusing purely on the flight of the ball and exactly where it would land, an external focus, performed significantly better than those who fixated on their own physical movements. You basically have to get out of your own way and let your automatic muscle memory do its job by keeping your conscious brain entirely focused outward on the physical target you're trying to hit. When you put all this brilliant data together, it means we really need to update an old cliché. We've always been told that practice makes perfect, but actually, scratch that. That's not quite enough. Practice under pressure, with focus, and with that glorious end goal in sight makes perfect. It's never just about logging hours in a comfortable, quiet room. It's about purposefully training your brain to handle the spotlight by simulating the stress, locking in a predictable routine, and pointing your mind exactly where it needs to go, away from your own body. So I'll leave you with this. The next time the room goes completely silent and all eyes turn to you, what's going to happen? Will your working memory be instantly flooded with the paralyzing fear of failure? Or will you use these tools to trick your own brain into absolute, unshakable focus? The science to defeat the choke is completely in your hands now. Go test these techniques out, reclaim your performance when it matters most, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.